Good afternoon. I am Tracy Sinclair, and we are just getting ready to attend a live press conference down at the Anchorage Police Department. There is a live shot of the room. This is to do with the officer-involved shooting that occurred earlier today in the area on Tudor around Piper Street. And this is what the scene looked like earlier today. Let's put this up for you real fast. This is what the scene looked like earlier today in the Tudor area. Again, we know that it is a fatal officer-involved shooting. We were not given much more information at the time, so we are waiting for Chief Sean Case from the Anchorage Police Department to join us for a live press conference here with an update. What we were told, and what we've also seen on some social media posts, were statements that there was a gentleman walking around with a gun in the area and that there were shots fired. Again, it was a fatal officer-involved shooting, and we are waiting for Police Chief Sean Case to come in and provide an update of that. What you're looking at is a scene earlier today. This was taken at about 2:40 today in the area where this occurred. We will keep watch on the scene at the police station as we get ready to hear from Chief Sean Case. Now, this is the third officer-involved shooting in the Anchorage area so far this year. We do know of at least one other in the state, and that was in Sitka just last month as well. And we are just waiting to hear from Chief Case. As more people join us, we are waiting to hear from Anchorage Police Chief Sean Case, an update on an officer-involved shooting, a fatal officer-involved shooting that occurred earlier today in the area around Tudor Road. And we know that it was around Piper Street in that region and Tudor. We did hear that, and we saw on the cameras that they were also doing some traffic around Lake Otis. They were manipulating traffic in that area and blocking off some roads due to this investigation. We did have a camera crew over there. This was about 2:40 this afternoon. Carol Ann's asking any time now. Yes, we are continuing to watch for the police chief to come in, and I believe there he is.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today at approximately 1:17 p.m., dispatch received approximately 13 calls, and I'll say that is an approximate. There was a lot of calls that came into dispatch center, but from the time that dispatch received their first call until the time of the officer-involved shootings, I counted at least 13 callers that came in. They were reporting a call in the area of Tudor and Piper involving a male subject dressed in dark clothes, and the information that was being passed varied amongst the 13 callers, but the information included he had a weapon. Some of the callers said that he was pointing the weapon at other people. Some of the callers said that the weapon was pointed at them, that he was putting the gun in and out of his waistband, that he was stepping into traffic. At one point in time, he stepped in front of a school bus and tried to stop a school bus. So, the range is pretty significant in terms of what people saw and observed and the level of victim that they were as they drove by. One caller said that the gun was pointed directly at him as he passed by. We dispatched several officers within 3 minutes. We had our first officer arrive on scene. And as officers arrived on scene, they observed the subject and tried to get in a position to make contact with the subject. At the time, the male was observed on the south side of Tudor, just east of Fulker. The officers exited their vehicles and began giving instructions. The subject then started walking north across Tudor. At that point in time, the officer that was involved in the shooting was traveling westbound on Tudor. And so if you can imagine, the subject was crossing Tudor as the officer was traveling westbound, which caused the officer to be in very close proximity when he exited his vehicle to the subject. The officer that fired his weapon provided commands to the subject. Some of the commands included that you'll see on the video when we do release the video, because this officer-involved shooting will fall under our release video, our policy for video release. But the officer ordered really the subject to take his hand off the gun, and shortly after providing that command, the officer fired approximately 5 rounds. And again, approximate, that's not the exact number, but from what I can tell from the body cam video, it was approximately 5 rounds. The subject was declared deceased at the time on scene. No officers were injured during the incident. This particular incident was caught on multiple body cams as well as multiple dash cam videos. Do you have any questions?
I'm just a little confused about the westbound, northbound. What was happening? An officer was in his vehicle and the man was crossing the street towards him. Is that towards the vehicle?
Absolutely, that's correct. Yeah, so you had officers that were on the same side of the street as the subject. They exited their vehicles. They started to provide or give commands to the subject. I can't say if it's because of the commands, but as officers were providing commands, the subject crossed the street away from the officers. At the same time, we had an officer coming in the opposite direction on Tudor, getting out of his vehicle, and the subject was walking in the direction of the officer. So when the officer got out of the car, the subject was in very, very close proximity to him.
Can you say approximately how close?
It's hard to tell because of the angle of the camera, but I would estimate it's 15 feet or less.
Okay.
It's very close.
And that was the officer that gave commands and eventually shot the suspect?
Correct.
Okay. And this, just while I have the microphone, the suspect, to your knowledge, didn't point a gun at the officer, but also did not drop the gun as commanded?
All I can tell you is the commands, will be clear on the video that everybody will have the opportunity to see when we release that, and the officer saying, take your hand off the gun. Unfortunately, the body-worn camera angle of that particular officer is blocked by his rifle, and so the video doesn't show exactly what the subject is doing at the time. We haven't looked at all the video, so there may be video that will show what the subject's doing more clearly, both with one of our videos or potentially a surveillance video that's attached to a business. We just haven't completed the investigation and collecting all that evidence at the time.
There were officers around clearly. Were there other pedestrians? Were there anybody else that was at the scene that could have been in danger?
It's Tudor Road, so there was vehicle traffic. There weren't pedestrians that were immediate, in the area, but there's certain pedestrian traffic on the sidewalks of Tudor Road. So, it's a busy road, and officers responding to the scene were certainly trying to get themselves in position to block traffic and pedestrians, but as with typical of these incidents, it happens pretty rapidly.
Just one last question. So was the suspect shot in the middle of the road or on the side of the road?
Middle of the road.
In the middle of the road, okay.
We talked to some of the witnesses immediately following and a lot of them were saying that there was a red vehicle involved. Was that just a civilian that just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time? Or is that tied to the suspect?
There were no vehicles tied to the subject.
And you said that he was shot twice? Or how many times was he shot?
I said the officer fired approximately 5 rounds, and we'll have exact counts, at a later time.
Any information at all about the suspect, where he came from? He exited a vehicle, or can you tell us anything more about what had happened prior that you know of?
Yeah, we don't believe that he was associated with a vehicle. All of the calls that we received was that he was on foot and walking in and out of the roadway. So at this time, we don't think he's associated with a vehicle. And broader information about the subject, what he was doing, we don't have that information right now.
This is the third officer involved shooting this year. I guess what would you like to say to residents who might fear that this could be the new norm?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think when I think about the officer-involved shootings, not just that we had this year, but also the ones that we had last year, and I often think about not just the officers that are impacted. We have a significant number of officers that have either been directly or indirectly involved with officer-involved shootings. I think about the neighborhoods that have been spread throughout town and the various communities, just the sheer number of people that this has impacted, and some of the violent activity that we've seen in Anchorage. And those things they're concerning to me, and I think they're concerning to us as a community. But I also think that, when we look at some of the challenges that we face here in Anchorage, and some of the efforts that we're doing community-wise or municipality-wise, trying to look at some of those challenges. And, we really have to step back and look at it from a broad lens, because this isn't just simply about officer-involved shootings. We have populations that we're concerned about. We have populations that are vulnerable. We see violent crime in the city that's challenging and has been for several years. And so it's not just the police department's response to some of these incidents. It's going to be how we respond as a community collectively.
Were non-lethal options being used in this situation? Well, obviously, it didn't end that way, but were other officers, using non-lethal options?
No, when the officers got out of their vehicle that were on the same side of the street, as well as the officer that ended up firing a round, it was very, very quick after they exited the vehicle that the officer-involved shooting took place. So no opportunity to use less lethal munitions.
The school bus. You said some callers reported that he jumped in front of a school bus. Were there children on the school bus?
What we know right now, there are no children on the school bus. So we do know there were no children on the school bus. But when I put that fact out, it's again I try to give the information what the officers knew at the time, and what they knew is that there was a school bus that he tried to stop, and that the school bus swerved to get around him in the roadway. That just kind of gives perspective on what the officers know at the time. Later on, we found out that there were no children on it, so it's just another factor the officers had to consider. All right, thank you.
And there we have it. That was Anchorage Police Chief Sean Case talking about the officer-involved shooting earlier today. It was a fatal shooting. According to Chief Case, about at least 13 people called about this person as they were on Tudor Road, it appears, with a gun. And we don't know much more. We do know that the gentleman crossed the road and another officer stopped him stopped his car, and he was the one that fired his weapon. The police chief said he thought about 5 rounds had been fired. No officers were injured, and there are multiple body camera and vehicle cameras that they will be able to take a look at as the investigation continues. Of course, we will have more on the Alaska's News Source and alaskasnewssource.com as more information becomes available.